This game stinks. This was the infamous marketing tagline used to promote the 1995 North American release of the role-playing video game Earthbound for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. In the years since, this stink cloud-themed marketing campaign has been maligned for what a failure it was to drive sales for the game, with Earthbound being viewed as a commercial flop at the time. It turned out that few were interested in, quote, the first role-playing game with BO. Who would have thought? But despite its lackluster launch, Earthbound has since grown to become one of the most beloved titles in Nintendo's back catalog, attracting an ever-growing fandom and directly inspiring dozens of wildly successful indie games. So this naturally raises the question, if Earthbound was a high-quality enough product to garner this sort of long-term success, why did they do the game so dirty with its marketing? Well, despite how ridiculous this thing seems in hindsight, to be fair, the prospect of marketing a game like Earthbound would have been a daunting challenge at the time. Keep in mind that this was the 90s, a decade where graphical innovation was king. We were only 1 year away from the release of the Nintendo 64 and just a few short months from the PlayStation 1 after all. Gaming audiences were excited for the 3D graphics that were just around the corner, and Earthbound's graphics looked sort of rudimentary by comparison. Its gameplay wouldn't have been any more enticing to mainstream audiences either. Turn-based role-playing games were notoriously unpopular in the West, and there would be little appetite for them until Final Fantasy VII broke through the market 2 years later. But there was something immediately apparent about Earthbound that gave it a unique appeal, that being its setting and characters. The game takes place in a fictionalized version of 90s America, and your party consists of 4 children wielding baseball bats, yo-yos, and psychic abilities. This was in stark contrast to the typical medieval fantasy settings of most RPGs at the time. Because of Earthbound's setting and child protagonists, it seems reasonable for a marketing team to conclude that kids would relate and should thus be the target demographic for their ad campaign. So, what caught the attention of 90s children more than anything else? Well, Nintendo's answer to that question was farts and boogers, apparently. To be fair, we were in the peak era of Nickelodeon's slime. Given everything that was working against Earthbound, asking potential customers to cut the coupon and not the cheese was certainly an approach that a marketing team could take, and maybe not quite as stupid an approach as it seemed in hindsight. Despite only demonstrating a surface-level understanding of what made Earthbound unique, there was some kind of logic there, and truthfully we'll never know if something else would have worked better. Still, we're left with one lingering question. With a launch as creative as the one that Earthbound had, by all rights the game should have shuffled off into obscurity. Yet all these years later, the love for this game is undeniable. So what was it about Earthbound that allowed it to defy the odds to become the cult classic that it is today? Well, beautiful viewer, I'm glad you asked, because the answer to that question is the topic of today's video. In 1995, if you were lucky enough to peel back the layers of this marketing campaign to see what was underneath, you would have been treated to, yes, a bizarre children's video game featuring burps and farts, but also an experience that I can honestly say without hyperbole is one of the best pieces of media ever made. A game that was all at the same time hilarious, sentimental, thought-provoking, surreal, and simply a joy to play. For the uninitiated, this concoction of seemingly disparate ingredients may indeed seem stinky, as its marketing campaign suggested, but any who have played it will know that the dish being cooked up was a genuine masterpiece. Earthbound was and is a handcrafted work of art, and if you bought the game back in 1995, that would have been immediately apparent to you from the game's packaging. In 1995, Nintendo initially distributed Earthbound in this massive box in order to hold its player's guide, and this book is a beautiful piece of publishing. It's styled as a travel guide, and just look at these deeply nostalgic photos spliced in with screenshots from the game. After spending just a little time with the player's guide, it immediately becomes clear why Earthbound's marketing campaign has been so maligned in the years since. While the magazine advertisement reads like a shitpost written by someone who only had Earthbound described to them over the phone, the guide is clearly a labor of love by a team of incredibly skilled writers and visual artists. It's simply a joy to let all of the photos and fonts wash over you. I especially love the way the game's sprites are brought to life through the beautiful clay figures of artist Masao Todori. The amount of hours that would have gone into making each of these is truly mind-boggling, and as far as I can tell, the only reason for their existence is to appear in this travel guide. But I'm so glad they do, because man, these things are iconic. Earthbound's travel guide is an appropriate pack-in because the level of artistry and attention to detail matches what you will find in the game, which will hopefully become apparent over the course of this video, but the travel guide is thematically appropriate as well. This is because, I'd argue, the experience of playing Earthbound actually manages to capture some of the meaning that can come from traveling in real life. Many elements of the game work together to create this effect, but it all starts with how its map is laid out and how its world unfolds itself to the player. As far as adventure games go, the world design of Earthbound is quite linear. You spend most of your time in relatively small towns with people to talk to, enemies to fight, and tasks to complete. Each of the game's towns are connected through intermediary areas or travel cutscenes, and your path through the world largely follows a straight line, with the game only ever asking you to backtrack a handful of times. This map layout and path through the game could have easily been boring and predictable, but in execution, it's able to avoid this by repeatedly surpassing our expectations. Like, look at how the game slowly escalates in terms of distance traveled. You're able to travel between the first and second town on foot, but when you're ready to move on to the third town, you need to take a bus. Between the third and fourth towns, you take a bus again, though this time you travel through several intermediary screens and get stuck in a traffic jam. Your methods of travel increase in strangeness as well. Later, you'll find yourself traveling to new areas by way of ship, submarine, UFO, and mysterious hole in the ground. But it isn't just the travel sequences that escalate in this way. The towns themselves also become more unexpected as you progress through the world. You begin your adventure in the small and comfortable suburb Onet, where you battle snakes and teenagers. Halfway through the game, you've made your way to the big city of Forside to fight mob bosses and taxi cabs, and by the end, you find yourself battling a variety of prehistoric beasts in the previously uncontacted, lost underworld. The further you get from home, the more unfamiliar your surroundings appear, and the more your imagination begins to run wild with possibilities. Because of this escalation, Earthbound is able to continuously drip-feed surprises to us, keeping us curious about what will come next for the entire 40-hour runtime. More importantly though, it offers us a gratifying sense of progression. By the end of the game, we notice that the 4 kids of our party have grown to accomplish things they wouldn't have thought possible at the beginning of their adventure, and we can't help but feel as though we've grown with them. But as great as this sense of progression is, all of it would be for nothing if the towns themselves weren't interesting to visit. Of course, we wouldn't be here talking about it today if that weren't the case. Take, for example, the resort town of Summers. You arrive here about 2/3 into your adventure after a fairly challenging stretch of the game, so the relaxed feeling of the town is certainly a welcome one. But despite how Summers appears on the surface, this is one of the more unwelcoming places in Earthbound. Summers is a vacation spot for the wealthy, so the visitors don't have a lot of kind words for you, and shop prices are well outside of what you're used to. Still, I find there's something appealing about getting the chance to visit somewhere that would normally be inaccessible. There's an opulence to the hotel in particular that I can't help but enjoy. The view of the ocean from your room is especially lovely to me. I think the pixelated visual style shows you just enough to let your imagination fill in the gaps. Contrast this with the town of Winters, a snowy, wooded area that feels desolate, holding only an academy and a general store. But Winters has a mysterious atmosphere as well, attracting people eager to spot Tessie, the lake monster. This area is similar to Summers though in how it defies our initial impression of it. While Summers is attractive on the surface but unwelcoming as you dig into it, Winters is the inverse, appearing cold initially but ultimately happy to host you. While the people in Summers were rich, visiting as a symbol of status or simply to get away from us filthy commoners, the people of Winters were brought together by their shared fascination in the mysteries of nature. These guys are happy to offer you food and shelter, and they refuse payment for their kindness. Each town in Earthbound offers a unique culture and atmosphere, which keeps us interested in the game by allowing us to wonder what surprising locations might be in store for us. This, combined with the escalating unfamiliarity of the world and increasingly elaborate travel sequences, absolutely deliver on the promise given by Earthbound's travel guide. That promise being that this video game is a real adventure. That's all well and good, I hear you saying. I understand that this game has a well-realized world and is better designed than its 90s advertisement might have led me to believe, but you said this game is bizarre, and I've yet to see anything I'd classify that way. To which I'd say, beautiful point, well said. But also, how about we watch the fucking video before we start throwing around wild accusations like this guy has no idea what he's talking about, and I can't believe I wasted my time watching this video, and boo, boo, get him, boo! I picked the adjective bizarre for the title of this video deliberately, and that's not just because it's a popular keyword for that algorithm. To me, it is remarkable that the level of quality in Earthbound's world design and atmosphere defies expectation, but the strangeness at the core of this game has only just begun to unveil itself to us. You see, Earthbound harbors a dark secret, and that is that the people who walk the streets of these towns are not well. Something has gone terribly wrong in the development of their psyches. As you explore Earthbound, it will begin to dawn on you that this is a sick world full of sick people. To begin to understand what I mean by this, let's return to Summers. During your exploration of the town, you'll come across Club Stoic. You make your way inside and you're greeted with the soft hum of a synth pad and some light chimes. You notice a mysterious stone sitting on stage. In an attempt to understand what you're looking at, you begin to talk to the club members who say, "I've finally awakened the inner me, the true self. The patrons of this club are able to stare into their own soul hard enough to burn a hole in their psyche. I'm now comfortable enough to stare at the real me, the true self, and burn the impression into my superego. I want to be in this comfort zone at any time, all the time, or at no time. My id is telling me." Didactically speaking, seminal evidence seems to explicate the fact that your repudiation of entropy supports my theory of space-time synthesis. Of this, I am irrefutably confident. You guys can't envision the final collapse of capitalism? Incredible. The show, it's already started. Everyone stares at the stone on stage and philosophizes. Doesn't it sound stupid? As someone who, later in this very video, will be waxing philosophical about the nature of good and evil, I feel like this scene exposes me for the pretentious kind of person I am, so I have to give it props for that. Another peculiar collection of characters can be found in the Desert Gold Mine. In this section of the game, you meet a miner who is unable to make progress due to being blocked by monsters. You explore the vast labyrinthine mine, fighting some fairly tough enemies, only to be greeted by the terrifying figure of the giant mole. As the mole rushes toward you, eyes glowing red, mouth and claws dripping with some unknown liquid, it says, "I am one of the masters of this hole. There are 5 masters in all. We are all moles, of course. I believe I am the 3rd strongest amongst us." A large number 3 wavers behind the master of this hole. After successfully defeating the mole, you're able to gauge your readiness for the rest of the mine. You think to yourself that you should be fine against the 4th and 5th strongest moles, however, you do feel a little anxious about the stronger ones. That fight was pretty challenging after all. You continue to explore the cave, avoiding poisonous snakes and giant ants, eventually encountering the next master of the hole. Again, you're rushed, but this mole says to you, "I am really the 3rd strongest master. I'll destroy you now." Okay, that's kind of weird. I guess it makes sense though. When you're so close in strength to your peers, it can be hard to determine where you stand, especially in the middle of the pack. Though surely the other moles will have the self-awareness to gauge their power levels. My strength falls between the 2nd and 4th strongest masters. Do you want to test me? I am truly the 3rd strongest master of this hole. I'll demonstrate the power of being 3rd to you. Ha ha ha, you fought the strongest master of this hole, the 2nd strongest master of this hole, the 4th strongest master of this hole, and the weakest master of this hole. I am truly the 3rd strongest master of this hole. Now you see the true advantage of being 3rd. Many of the bizarre characters of Earthbound can be found in these sorts of elaborate scenarios, and there are plenty more that I'd love to tell you about, like the Dungeon Man. But honestly, I wouldn't know where to begin with the Dungeon Man, and besides, there's plenty of absurdity to be found outside of these scenarios as well. Talk to any random Joe on the streets of Earthbound, and you're likely to find a head scratcher or two.
Hey you, if you meet a beautiful, seductive woman who's looking for me, tell her I say hi. Anyway, I don't think a woman like that would be looking for me.
I have fake teeth, so I like soft foods, not like rocks or stones. They're too hard.
The zombies got me. I should have gotten some zombie insurance. Ugh, quit staring at my hips. Why don't you stand somewhere else instead of behind me? Man, those are children. Here we have one of my favorite types of person, man who hates his family. My wife has run away for a 2nd time. I'm such a lucky man. A lot of the townsfolk have a mean edge to them that I really enjoy. There's a cashier who says, "Is there anything I can do for you?" "No? Are you just here to say hi?" What a loser. Then there's the woman at the front desk of the hospital. "I'm not busy right now. Shall I explain the hospital system?" No? Yeah, well, I am actually pretty busy. There's an absurdity to the writing in Earthbound that has definitely become more commonplace these days, but I can't think of anything like it on the Super Nintendo. And to me, it still holds up to this day. It adds to that travel/road trip feel we discussed previously. In any road trip I've taken, my friends and I will inevitably encounter some sort of quirky character who says something so off the wall that we end up quoting it to each other years later. Earthbound's dialogue has that exact quality. It's clear to me that so much time and attention must have gone into not only writing this game, but also in translating it into English in a way that would land. It makes Nintendo's 1995 marketing tagline, "Comes with more rude smells than the old pull my finger joke," even more embarrassing. I don't think anybody at the time would have suspected the caliber of comedy present in Earthbound to exceed its marketing material by such a large margin. Webster's dictionary defines...
Boo, boo, get it, boo!
I know, just bear with me. Webster's dictionary defines bizarre as odd, extravagant, or eccentric in style or mode. I think this definition certainly applies to what we've discussed of Earthbound so far, but this silly little dictionary offers us a second definition, and that is involving sensational contrasts or incongruities. So far, much of what we've discussed in Earthbound has had a fairly consistent tone. The game has shown itself to be weird and maybe a little mean, but all in service of making us laugh. However, the reason that I find bizarre to be such a fitting adjective for the title of this video is because of that second definition. You see, Earthbound is a game of contrasts. For every moment of levity in the game, we're given an equal amount of heaviness. Just look at the enemies of Earthbound. While many of them are played for laughs, like the moles in the gold mine, some of them are downright spooky and surreal. For example, there's the putrid mold man, the uncontrollable sphere, the kiss of death, the French kiss of death, the playground of doom, a big pile of puke, the kraken, and the Ohio sign. Of course, a list of Earthbound's spookiest enemies would not be complete without its final boss, Giygas. But we're not quite ready to talk about him. The creepiness of this game offers a contrast to its humor, but this alone would only serve to make Earthbound an experience akin to a haunted house ride. No, when I say that Earthbound is an experience of contrasts, I mean that to contrast its hilarity, it offers some genuine intensity and seriousness, most of which come from its plot. Earthbound opens with our player character Ness asleep in the dead of night, only to be woken by a large crash outside. You leave your house to investigate and run into your unusual neighbor named Liar, who tells you that a meteor landed nearby. Luckily, Liar says he's okay because he always eats garlic and exercises to make his body stronger, but the weaker citizens probably fainted. He goes on to say, "Also, I want to tell you, whoops, I almost told you about my, by the way," and quickly changes the subject. Not wanting to get involved further with this unusual gentleman, you move on to check out the meteor landing site, but your progress is blocked by the police and your, quote, bothersome neighbor Pokey. You decide to head home and get back to bed. Later, you're woken by a knock at the front door. You answer the door to be confronted by Pokey, who tells you that his younger brother Picky has gone missing. He then asks for your help. You go along with him and wind up at the meteor landing site. There, you find the younger brother who tells you that he fell asleep while trying to find Pokey, who had gotten scared and ran away. He then wonders aloud which of them is the real big brother. Suddenly, you hear a loud buzzing sound accompanied by a voice. "A bee I am. Not." This creature who is not a bee tells you that his name is Buzz and he's from a devastated future. He warns that the cosmic destroyer Giygas has sent all into the horror of eternal darkness. He says, however, that there is an ancient prophecy that a boy will save the universe from this fate, and he believes Ness is that chosen boy. After your conversation, the four of you head home, but a strange being appears and blocks your way. The metallic creature says,
"It's been a long time, Buzz. You've been successful at foiling Master Giygas' plans, but now you must surrender. You're no longer a hero, but a useless insect. I'll stomp you hard."
This is a Starman Jr., a variation of a late-game enemy who will appear in areas heavily influenced by Giygas. During this battle, we get a preview of some late-game psychic abilities from Buzz and the Starman Jr. We also get to see how Pokey conducts himself in battle, where he pretends to cry, uses you as a shield, acts innocent, and thinks to himself. After defeating the Starman Jr., Buzz tells you that they can't relax yet. From now on, you will be fighting enemies sent by Giygas, as well as humans who have evil thoughts. Keep that in mind, it'll be important later. You finally return Pokey and Picky to their home, where we're introduced to the boy's mother, who, instead of being relieved to see her boys, says that she'll have to think of a suitable punishment for them. Their father tells the boys, "You're really going to get it now." The two boys run off screen and their father chases after them. We then hear a pixelated smashing sound. Opening your E-rated video game with a depiction of child abuse is certainly a bold choice, but I think it's effective for a few reasons. It lets us know that this is a world where bad things could happen to our protagonists, and it also adds a layer of depth to Pokey's character. Later, Pokey will get up to some pretty heinous shit, so it was smart to give us an explanation for why he is the way that he is, even if we don't like him. This level of thoughtfulness isn't limited to Pokey. Each of the kids in the game have fairly different home lives and relationships with their parents. This allows players who are interested to think about how those relationships influence the personalities of those characters. Like, Ness's parents are hands-off, even physically absent, but they are supportive of him and his decisions. This lets Ness feel like he has adults who have his back, which gives him the freedom to be more adventurous and self-determining. Meanwhile, Jeff, another member of your party, has a less ideal relationship with his parents. His mother is never mentioned, while his father is completely absent and uninterested. This makes Jeff seem lonely to me, but we do see that this gives him a massive appreciation for the friendships he develops with the other kids. And let's not forget Jeff's attachment to his very special friend, Tony. These character traits and relationship dynamics can only really be gleaned through brief lines of dialogue. They're not the primary focus of the game, but the fact that they're there at all is remarkable. Earthbound would have been a perfectly fine video game without these little dynamics, but their existence is enough to make the characters just that little bit more real, which results in the game feeling more substantial as a whole. But this raises an interesting question. If Earthbound could have been a fine video game without this level of attention to detail, why is it there? Well, the answer to that question is obvious, I think. It's that people cared enough to put it there. Earthbound was undeniably made by dozens of passionate and hardworking people, and I don't want to give all the game's credit to just one person, but it's also equally undeniable that the game would not be what it is without its writer and director, Shigesato Itoi. By the looks of things, Itoi has lived a pretty rich and interesting life. Outside of directing video games, he's also written some bold advertising campaigns, appeared in TV and movies, mined for literal gold, and took 8th place in the 1992 World Championship for Monopoly, which Itoi describes as a game of human emotion and strategy. While researching Itoi for this video, I learned something that relates directly to the character relationship dynamics we were just discussing. In an interview, he mentioned that around the time he was making Earthbound, he and his partner were expecting a child. Part of the inspiration for this game was to make something fun for this child to play when they were old enough. Because of this, it seems reasonable to speculate that ideas of parenthood were at the forefront of Itoi's mind while he was writing Earthbound. Anyway, the reason I bring this up at all is to highlight the kind of writer that Itoi is, and by extension, what kind of game Earthbound is. You'd never guess from the Stink Cloud marketing campaign that this would be an experience with any substance, but by this point, it should be clear that Itoi and his team weren't the type to just slap some bullshit together and call it a day. No, they intended to make something worthwhile. There's a quote by Itoi used in the documentary Earthbound USA that goes, "If you can figure out what the question is, the answers will come, whether it's on a societal level or an individual level. The ability to ask the big questions is the source of creativity. It is everything." Let's return to our story to see what other sorts of questions Itoi might have been exploring. Shortly after Ness embarks on his adventure, you're given the opportunity to return to your creepy neighbor Liar's house. Upon entering, you're treated to even creepier vibes as you see holes in the floorboards and springs popping out of the man's bed. Liar says, "I'm doing this because I trust you." He invites you to accompany him to his basement. Against your better judgment, you decide to follow Liar. You chase him through several tunnels, and at the end, Liar turns around and says, "I'll show you, but you're the only one. Come on." Lucky for you, you're playing Earthbound and not Lisa the Painful, and Liar turns out to actually have something interesting to show you, the Mani Mani statue. Liar tells you to leave now or you may start getting greedy thoughts. The golden statue glows strangely. Shortly after, you're tasked with tracking down a magic girl named Paula when you stumble across the Happy Happy Village, and the people here seem off. A young couple tells you that they're here to join the Happy Happy religious group and that their child is waiting for them at home in another town. They say they hope to bring back some happiness as a souvenir. You go and talk to the other townspeople who say, "You might misunderstand what I have to say, but Carpenter's voice affects one's mind like a hypnotist. When the world is changed to blue, a peaceful country can be established. Mr. Carpenter communicates with the divine, so he is able to deliver inspired messages. When I painted everything blue, as Mr. Carpenter said, my wife who had run out on me returned home. I'm just a plain old cow, but Mr. Carpenter's messages always move me." You make your way through a massive gathering of cultists to confront Mr. Carpenter. The Mani Mani statue sparkles behind him as he says, "Thanks for coming. I've been waiting for you. I need your assistance to help make the world world blue and change it into a happy and peaceful society. Will you be my right-hand assistant? You refuse his request, and Carpenter says, if you don't want to be my right hand, my left would be just fine. Just kidding. Your existence is a problem for me and my religion. Defy me and I'll end your pitiful game. Carpenter zaps you with lightning, which teleports you back to the cow for some reason. A nearby villager lets it slip that he and an overweight kid abducted Paula and hid her in a cabin nearby. You find Paula, who gives you the Franklin badge, granting you the ability to deflect Mr. Carpenter's lightning attacks. The overweight kid helping Carpenter turns out to be Pokey because, of course it's fucking Pokey, and you make your way back to Carpenter to defeat him. After your battle, Carpenter says, do you see the Mani Mani statue behind me? Since I got the statue, I have been doing peculiar things. Please forgive me if you can. I just wanted to have a normal life. I apologize to everyone. You go to talk to the other villagers. Mr. Carpenter was pretty strange, but so was everyone else. We might have been listening to evil messages rather than good. I woke up from the dream. This sequence is such an excellent encapsulation of what makes Earthbound brilliant. It has plenty of silly moments, sure, but it's still eerie and atmospheric. Plus, I think it's bold to have a subplot involving brainwashing and cults in a children's video game. But there's something about the way that this section ends that feels a little off to me. I think it's weird how the statue's spell suddenly dissipates after defeating Carpenter. Like, you don't destroy the statue or anything, it's still just sitting there, menacingly. Also, Pokey seems like he's just as devious as before. Let's see if there are any clues we can find in the rest of the game as to what is going on with the statue. The final time we see the statue is in another one of my favorite sections in the game, Moonside. This is the weird upside down version of the game's major city, Fourside. In Moonside, yes means no and no means yes. Here you're attacked by some of the most surreal enemies in the entire game, including a gasoline pump who quietly counts down 3, 2, and the most disgusting creation of all, abstract art. Damn paintings. Why can't you just look like the things you look like? The boss of this sequence is revealed to be the Mani Mani statue. After you defeat it, you wake up in the back room of the department store in Fourside with the statue in pieces on the floor. It turns out that Moonside was an illusion being cast by the Mani Mani statue. So I guess that settles it. There was nothing unusual about the end of the Happy Happy Village section after all, just a creepy magic statue casting creepy magic spells. Itoi was definitely not saying anything about the nature of propaganda and human beings' susceptibility to acquiesce to convenient yet illusory narratives that ultimately only serve to undermine ourselves and relinquish power to those that only have their own interests in mind, and a call for the player to introspect about how perhaps they themselves may indeed not be immune to those same illusions. The main quest that has been guiding you through the world of Earthbound comes in the form of its sanctuaries. There are 8 of these sanctuaries sprinkled throughout the map, which you will need to visit in order to collect the melodic fragments. The game doesn't tell you what exactly these things do, but you know you need them in order to defeat Giygas. The sanctuaries generally take the form of a system of caves containing a gauntlet of enemies, and at the end you fight a boss. If you lose, you start the whole thing over, but if you win, you get your melodic fragment. These sanctuaries are essentially following the game design textbook format for what RPG fans usually just call a dungeon. Before we continue with our story, I have to be honest and say that these dungeons are an aspect of Earthbound worthy of criticism. This is due to their difficulty and the game's battle system. The game contains several noticeable spikes in difficulty that don't feel particularly well balanced. I felt this way especially in the sewer and department store sections during this most recent playthrough, but the difficulty is uneven throughout. Dying over and over again, walking back from save points, and fighting dozens of identical enemies definitely drags down the pace of the game. These sections make the game's runtime probably 10 hours longer than it needs to be. I suspect that Earthbound uses its difficulty to mask the fact that its combat is rather shallow. There's nearly zero room for player expression, with your decisions in battle feeling prescribed. I was going to say that it's an aspect of the game that shows its age, with Earthbound's sequel and spiritual successors vastly improving the battle system, but honestly, even its peers on the Super Nintendo like Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG totally outclass Earthbound in terms of combat variety and player engagement. Still, and this defense may sound rather stoner-coded, I can't deny that I just love to be hypnotized by Earthbound's battle music, drop-dead gorgeous backgrounds, and weird fucking enemies. I could lock eyes with these little freaks all day. As an audio-visual experience, the battles of Earthbound offer me an otherworldly experience like no other piece of media. And I can't lie, I do get that juicy release of dopamine every time the numbers go up. But if this stuff doesn't tickle you in the same way that it does for me, the battle battles and those dungeons especially don't have a lot to offer, sadly. Though an aspect of the dungeons that do work for me is the presentation of their finales. The bosses have some of the most exciting designs and challenging movesets. These assholes will give you a hard time, but I feel that serves to make your moments of victory all the more satisfying. The game commemorates these moments of victory by taking you into the light of day, and the music that plays is so soothing. You absolutely feel the relief of clearing a difficult challenge. Things pause and Ness relives a memory of a seemingly innocuous moment from the past, but one that we can tell is charged with emotion. In the final hours of the game, once you collect the final melodic fragment, the screen fades to white and we get to relive a really sweet moment with Ness of his parents naming him. Afterwards, the game drops us in Magicant, a place we're told is the realm of Ness's mind. This place is weird, and that's saying something for an area that comes 35 hours into a very weird game. The wise old man who greets you says that this is a place of beauty, kindness, sorrow, sadness, and hatred. He says, of course, there's an evil and violent side to you. The Sea of Eden sits at the center of those feelings. It takes you to the truth about yourself. As you explore and talk to the inhabitants of Magicant, you're given some mysterious and thought-provoking lines of dialogue. I'm just a faint memory. You don't usually remember me, but you've heard my song in the back of your mind. I'd like you to take your time, because this country will disappear when you wake up. You'll also talk to some of the previous enemies who hold a grudge against Ness. I like this detail. It's a clever way, I think, to show us that Ness is carrying guilt for the monsters he beats up. Sitting alone, you find Pokey, who says, Ness, you're so lucky. I envy you. I have no luck. But Ness, well, okay, let's just be friends forever, alright? You battle your way through Ness's mind with your muscular imaginary bird boy friends and finally drop down into what could only be the Sea of Eden. This is by far the most heavily guarded area in Magicant. At the center, the place where we're told sits the center of Ness's feelings, we're shown the truth of ourselves, and it is, of course, the Mani Mani statue. The symbolism of this moment, I think, is pretty straightforward, but also kind of profound. Up until this point, the statue has been something external to the characters. It has been an object that they could point to and blame their misdeeds on. But by placing the statue in Ness's mind, the game is presenting us with two truths. The first is that the people who fell under the influence of the statue did so because there was something internal to them that it was giving an outlet to or amplifying in some way. Second is that Ness, and by extension us, the player, are no better than any of the other characters. Whatever the statue was amplifying in them is inside of us as well. And what's profound to me is that this sort of thing is true in real life as well. If there's one thing that history has shown us, it's that when we have something external to us that we can hide behind, whether it's a charismatic leader or the anonymity that comes with being part of a large group, we're capable of some truly despicable things. And this isn't something that just happens on a large scale. Have you ever said something hurtful to someone you cared about and later blamed it on not getting enough sleep or missing lunch or something like that? The uncomfortable truth is that these external things and circumstances aren't creating the impulses inside of us. They're either lessening our inhibitions against them or giving them an outlet, and I think that's what the statue is showing us here. Just like the wise old man said to Ness, there is a hateful and violent side to all of us. It's baked into our DNA. We can't blame it on something else. It's something deeply core to who we are as beings, and denying that only serves to divide us from each other as well as from ourselves. And to me, I think that's what Earthbound is telling us here in Magicant. Once fully realizing this and coming to terms with this truth about yourself, you and your friends are finally ready to face the game's final boss, Giygas. There's a famous story in the Earthbound community about the origins of Giygas. It comes from a 2003 interview with Shigesato Itoi. He said that once when he visited the movie theater as a child, he had mistakenly walked into the wrong auditorium. On the screen was playing a mystery horror film called The Military Policeman and the Dismembered Beauty. At the time, Itoi would have been 8 or 9 years old, and the scene he walked in on is honestly pretty creepy. Itoi said that after having this experience, he went home to his parents in a daze, so much to the extent that they were legitimately worried about him. Even as an adult, it's clear that this experience had a big impact on Itoi. In the interview, he gives details about the scene he walked in on that weren't actually in the film, at least not in the version that's available online now. This implies that in all those years since, he never revisited the film. The images he saw as a child were left to fester and mutate in his mind. And as we'll see in the following segment of this video, Itoi channeled this festering childhood trauma into the final act of Earthbound. In order to reach Giygas, you and your friends will need to use an invention of Jeff's dad, Dr. Andonuts. You approach him and the normally aloof scientist says, "This is very hard for me to tell you, but..." He leads you and your party away from the others. In order to defeat Giygas, you must warp to the past. This can be done by way of the Phase Distorter 3, however, the machine cannot warp living things. Life is demolished in the process of warping. The only way to accomplish the time travel is to transfer your brain program into a robot and send the robot to the past. The transfer means that your spirit will go with the robot while your body is left behind. I cannot promise that your spirit will come back after the battle in the past, yet you must understand that the 4 of you are the chosen ones. Do you still wish to face Giygas? You tell him, yes, I see. You really have set your mind on this. Let me take a good look at you now. Ness, please give me that red cap. Ready? Stand by. And just like that, you cross the point of no return and warp to the past. You exit the Phase Distorter and you're able to see how you and your friends have been transformed, and it's upsetting. The 4 kids, previously so vibrant and brimming with individuality, are now identical gray machines. The only distinguishing feature among them is Ness's red hat. You and your friends battle your way through the strange gray wasteland and finally make it to the entrance of Giygas' lair. You enter the cave and the floor writhes beneath you like intestines. You reach the end of the cave and it's hard to tell what you're looking at. The line between machine and organism has become so blurred that the distinction no longer matters, but you know that this must be Giygas. He must recognize you as well because the ground begins to shake and somehow the image of Ness's face emerges from the mass of flesh and machinery that is Giygas. Suddenly, an even more disturbing figure appears, and it's none other than Pokey. Ness, are you surprised? It's me, Pokey. I assist only the strong and able. That's Pokey. Master Giygas. No, Giygas is no longer the wielder of evil. He has become the embodiment of evil itself, which he cannot control on his own. He is the evil power. Your fight with Giygas and Pokey begins. As you exchange blows, Pokey grins at you from behind the glass of his heavily armored machine, and as if to mock you, Giygas silently uses your own signature moves against you as he continues to project Ness's face. After dealing enough damage, Pokey says, "You must feel pretty stupid to keep fighting without even knowing what Giygas looks like. If you were to see Giygas, you would be so petrified with fear, you'd never be able to run away. That's how scary it is. So, do you want me to turn off the devil's machine? Well, prepare to be amazed." The scene fades and reality itself appears to warp before your eyes. So, isn't this terrifying? I'm terrified too. Giygas cannot think rationally anymore, and he isn't even aware of what he is doing now. His own mind was destroyed by his incredible power. What an almighty idiot. Yep, that's what he is. And you will be just another meal to him. Immediately you lash out with your baseball bat and land a critical hit, though it's hard to tell if it had any real impact. Giygas attacks your party, but you cannot grasp the true form of his attack. The scene changes again as the figure of Giygas bleeds in and out of the darkness.
It hurts, Ness.
In his 2003 interview, Shigesato Itoi laughed as he told the interviewer that the process of writing the lines for Giygas brought him to tears. He said that Giygas is something you can't make sense of, but there is a part of him that deserves love.
It hurts, it hurts.
Itoi told the interviewer that the scene from the movie he had mistakenly walked in on as a child was one that depicted sexual assault. The boy saw this depiction of violence and eroticism melded together when he was far too young to understand either component. Itoi described the scene as a direct attack on his brain. This was the memory that Itoi felt the need to draw upon in the creation of Giygas, and in my estimation, it imbues the entire scene with this palpable feeling of confusion and fear, the kind that can only accompany a child's sudden and irreversible realization of just how wrong things in this life can get. Go back! Giygas attacks your party again and again. Still, you cannot grasp the true form of his attack. Friends? You try desperately to keep your party alive using every defensive ability and item just to hold on.
I'm so sad, Ness.
Giygas attacks again, but this time Paula's body becomes numb and she is unable to move. When it's time to select a move for her, she's very low on psychic points. Her only options are do nothing or pray. Paula prays from the bottom of her heart. Please give us strength. If it is possible, please, somebody, help us. We're shown scenes of all of the people you've met over the course of your journey, each praying for the safety of you and your friends.
I feel good.
Giygas dissolves into a sea of red static. Paula prays again. I can't think of anyone else. Someone, anyone, please help us. Paula's call was absorbed by the darkness. I'm happy. Out of sheer desperation, Paula calls out one more time for anyone to help, and this time it does reach someone. Paula and her friends' calls touch the heart of this person, but you're unable to make out their name. They pray for the kids, having never met them before. A massive amount of damage is dealt to Giygas. The unknown person continues to pray, and again, Giygas takes an even bigger blow. Ness, 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 ness. Finally, the name of this mysterious person is revealed, and it's your name. The person holding the controller, playing Earthbound. You keep praying. Your enemy takes 222,000 points of damage, and just like that, the war against Giygas is over. As emotional and exciting as the ending of the game was, the first time I played it, I was sort of confused. I wasn't exactly sure why they chose to bring the player into the story at this point. It sort of came out of nowhere for me. But upon further reflection, I think I understand what Shigesato Itoi was communicating with this choice, and to me, it's quite profound. The final hours of this game and the last bit of this video have been pretty heavy. With the Mani Mani statue, Earthbound asks us to take a clear look at ourselves and fully acknowledge our more unsavory qualities. And the final boss of this game is essentially a physical embodiment of one of the cruelest, most violating acts one human being can inflict on another, as we learned in that interview with Itoi. But as we've discussed previously, Earthbound is a bizarre game of contrast, so of course it wasn't going to leave us in the depths of despair like that. To me, what the game is asking us to recognize here is that playing through a 40-hour RPG is a big time commitment. If you made it all the way to the end, there must have been something pulling you along that entire way. Earthbound is betting that the feeling pulling you along was simply an affection for Ness and his friends. At some level, you cared very deeply about what these fictional children were going through despite having never met them, as the dialogue in the fight says. And there's something quite beautiful about that. You may have a hateful side just like anyone else, but you are capable of caring deeply about others that you've never met. That feeling inside of you is just as real and worthy of recognition. Beyond that, you're not alone in that feeling. Earthbound has stood the test of time for a reason. It turns out that lots of people feel the same way that you do. And that's what this ending is. It's showing you that despite the evils of the world that Giygas and the Mani Mani statue represent, we care, and maybe that's enough. Which leads me to my final point, and that is to say, thank you so much for caring enough about what I have to say to watch to the end of this video. You are what makes this world good, and I'm so grateful that you invited me into your life for this short time. I hope I made it worth your while. My intention with this channel is to make videos that are memorable and worth revisiting in the same way that Earthbound is, which is maybe a lofty goal, but I believe it's important that people have stuff like that to watch. If you'd like to help me continue to make this dream of mine possible, please consider supporting my work over on Patreon. For just $2, you can gain permanent access to my Discord server, and you will see your name in the credits of future videos. If you'd like to send me a one-time donation, there's a link for that in the description as well. Again, thank you so much. Oh, and if you're wondering whatever happened to Pokey, let's just say that he went on to live happily ever after.